testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, counsel, the court made a determination that this particular witness is not subject to the court's exclusionary order, so you can inquire on direct, Mr. Wixon.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, will you please state and spell your full name for the record?
My name is Jason Gwilliam, Jason Gwilliam.
And where do you live?
I live in Springville, Utah.
How long have you lived there?
I've lived there approximately 28 years.
Are you related to Chad Daybell?
I am related to Chad Daybell.
Can you tell the jury how?
I married Samantha Gwilliam, who is Tammy Daybell's sister, making Chad and I brother-in-laws.
How long have you been brother-in-law?
I married Samantha in 1995, so about 28 years.
During the time that you've been married to Samantha, have there been a number of years that you've lived around Chad Daybell and Tammy Daybell and their family?
Yes.
About how many years did you live in the same community as them?
When my wife and I were first married, we spent approximately 2 years, year and a half in Cedar City. And Chad and his family at that time were in Ogden. We moved into Springville. Well, I'm going to go on and say about 26 years. We moved into Springville in the winter of 96. And I think they moved in shortly after that in 97. So from 1997 until they moved to Idaho.
When did they move to Idaho?
Moved to Idaho in 2015.
So 18 years, does that sound right?
Yes.
When they moved to Springville, did you live in the same neighborhood?
When they first moved in, we actually lived across the street from each other. After that, sequentially, we moved around the corner. We were probably within a block for that entire time.
Can you explain to the jury kind of the nature of the relationship? How often did you have interaction with Chad and his family?
We would have interaction with them. It wasn't uncommon for at least once or twice a week. In Chad and I's case, probably sometimes 3 to 4 times or more a week.
Did you go to the same church?
We did attend the same church.
Did you and Chad ever spend any time working together?
We did spend some time working together. Chad and I had opportunity throughout that time to share, I think, at least 3 shop spaces together. And previous to him moving up to Idaho, he and I worked together for 6 months before he went up there.
Could you explain to the jury, do you feel like you are someone who is close to Chad?
I felt like that Chad and I were very close.
Are you aware of any other friends during that time period that Chad had that were maybe closer even than you were?
He had friends from high school. He had other relatives that he had. But it probably wasn't as close as what we were, or I felt we were.
Being relatives and close friends, did you and Chad ever have one-on-one talks or conversations where you might confide in one another?
We had a lot of backing up. We have a lot of talks where we would talk about different issues with regards to family, with regards to religion, with regards to just about anything. And I felt like we had some really deep conversations in regards to a number of things, just as 2 good friends and brother-in-laws would.
Was there ever a time that Chad expressed to you any concerns about his marriage to Tammy?
I don't want to say concerns at that time, but you have your relationships that you have with your spouse, and there are times where you don't always get along. And so we might have discussed and talked about some of that.
Did Chad ever discuss with you his intimacy with Tammy, his wife?
There were times he did.
What in particular would he discuss with you about that?
Object at this point. This isn't relevant.
Sustained.
Was there anything specific in your discussions with Chad that he explained if he had concerns about his relationship with Tammy?
Just in the fact that I think he felt like at times it was a little vanilla. It was a little bland.
What did he mean by, what did he say about that?
Just in certain aspects of the relationship, that it was just a marriage of just, we have a lot of routine, just general routine that we go through.
Did you and Chad share the same religious views, generally speaking?
Generally speaking, while he was in Utah, yes, we did.
Had Chad ever confided in you or shared with you any experiences that he may have had in La Jolla, California?
He did.
Can you explain La Jolla? Yes. Can you explain to the jury what did he tell you about that experience?
Said he had an experience that was a little life-changing in the fact that he was in the ocean. Large wave came in, a lot of rocks, smashed him against the rocks, chewed up his back pretty good. And it was one of those moments that you just don't forget.
And did he also share with you an experience that he had in Flaming Gorge, Utah?
Yes, he did.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. This is becoming leading.
Overruled.
Yes, he did.
Thank you. What was that experience?
Another experience in his youth where he was jumping off cliffs, and as he hit the water, he felt that his spirit separated from his body and become torn from his body.
Is that something that he'd explained to you originally?
He had talked to me about that.
Judge, could we get some foundation as to time, date?
Sure. Can you let the jury know, when did these conversations occur? What year? approximately?
Conversations occurred early 2000s when we would have conversations about that.
And we'll get to it later, but was there a later time that you also discussed these?
We did discuss these later. Yes.
But in the early 2000s is what you're saying as to these two conversations, is
Yes.
that right?
I'm going to have you, Mr. Rickson, as well as you, Mr. Gwilliam, just please slow down a little bit and try not to talk over the top of each other for our record. Thank you.
Sure. At some point in time, did Chad's religious views change?
I believe they did.
Let's first explain to the jury, when did you first start seeing this kind of a change?
I would say at the time he started writing his books.
Can you pin it down to an approximate year?
If I were to put an approximate year to it, I would say 2006 to 2007.
In what way did his religious views change?
They became more focused, hyper-focused on preparing end of times, things of that nature.
When you use the word hyper-focused, what do you mean by that?
I think as a general rule, most people involved in our religion have a tendency to try to round out the religious information they receive. And in this case, by saying hyper-focused, I would say that it became more of an obsession and more than normal.
At any point in time, during this time frame, did Chad ever express to you a feeling that he had received visions?
He did.
And approximately when did he first start expressing that to you?
Probably around 2010, 2011.
What types of visions did he tell you that he was having?
They were visions regarding how things were going to play out in the last days.
At some point in time, did Chad again visit with you about this experience from Flaming Gorge and La Jolla, California?
Yes, he did.
Did anything about the experiences as he shared them with you change?
Originally, there were experiences that you have that are impactful. They soon became near-death experiences as opposed to just something that was impactful.
Could you explain a little bit more about that to the jury as to what Chad would explain when he couched them as near-death experiences?
Originally, when the stories were told, it was an experience that happened, and then it became an experience that happened in La Jolla, of where I had an experience where I saw a relative that had deceased and passed on. And then the experience in Flaming Gorge became my body and spirit were torn and the veil was ripped and I could see into the heavens and into the eternities.
Was there anything about that change that you were concerned by?
Yeah.
What was that?
That it wasn't consistent, that it just became more of a narrative now.
From that point forward, did you continue to see Chad's religious views change?
I did.
In what way?
It again started focusing more on end times, more on what would happen in America, what would happen with things in the future.
When did he first start expressing his views on those things?
That would have been around 2013, 2014.
And could you be a bit more specific about the nature of what he was telling you?
He got involved with other authors. They started to publish books and write books. They would talk about, in particular,
Judge, I'm going to object at this point unless there's some foundation that establishes how he knows this rather than this narrative.
Sustain.
Can you just isolate your comments to things that you heard directly from Chad?
Chad Daybell told me there would be 2 earthquakes that would happen. There would be the Wasatch wake-up quake.
And Judge, could I have some foundation as to when this discussion supposedly took place?
He's
Is
on
that
his-
is that an objection?
That's an objection,
prior to-
Judge.
Overruled.
Go ahead, please.
These conversations started in 2013, 2014, and continued on until he left to go to Idaho and continued on past that.
And I think before we had an objection, I'd ask you to explain to the jury kind of the nature of the things he was telling you about his change in view.
I was informed that there would be earthquakes, that there would be destruction in America. I was informed that there would be invading troops that would come from various different countries into the Americas.
Did those views that he shared with you, did they cause you any concern?
Sure.
In what way?
Well, it's a fear tactic.
What do you mean by
Judge, I'm going to
start?
object. It calls for speculation.
Overruled.
You may continue.
In my opinion, it's a fear tactic. It's a way to let people know I know more than you, and therefore you should listen to me.
Why did you perceive it that way?
I perceived it that way because when you bring up anything on a natural disaster, it has a tendency to create fear. When you bring in wars and rumors of wars, it creates fear.
Eventually, I think you said Chad and his family moved to Idaho.
Yes,
And what year was that again?
2015.
At the time that he moved, had he invited you to move with him?
He had.
Can you explain to the jury how that request went and why he was asking you to come?
Towards the end of 2015, he expressed his desire for my wife and I and family to move up to Idaho so that we could be in proximity with our families, with each other.
Did he say any more about that?
He felt that it would be good for us to move up there in order to escape the earthquakes and the desolation and the things that would happen in Utah.
What was he telling you about what it would be like in Rexburg?
He said that Rexburg would be a city of light, place of refuge, place that people would want to come to and be at.
And what was your reaction when he asked you to come up?
My curiosity at first was piqued because I wanted to know. I don't want to be in the middle of a giant earthquake. So naturally, I thought, okay, this is something that might be of interest.
Did you take stock in any of his visions? Did you believe any of those things?
Originally, yes, I did.
At that time, were you still embracing maybe some of what he was teaching?
During that time frame, yes.
So why did you eventually not move up to Idaho?
Didn't feel it was right.
Any specific reason why?
There were things that were going on that to me, it didn't feel right. We had opportunity to visit. Idaho's a beautiful place and a great place for some. It just, for us, wasn't going to be a place that we needed to be at.
Did you tell Chad no, you weren't going to move?
We did.
Did he ever ask you to come up again?
He did.
How often would he ask?
Are you looking specifics or generality?
Well, generality first, then we'll go to specifics.
Generality, just whenever we could. And we did go visit. We had opportunity to go attend family functions and events up there.
Did he ever ask again for you and your family to move to Idaho?
There was a letter that was written to me
When was that letter written?
in 2016.
And that was a letter from who?
That was from Chad.
What did he say in that letter?
In that letter, he essentially told me that we needed to be in Idaho.
Did he say why he believed that?
He said we needed to be in Idaho because within the next 3 years, there would be a giant earthquake that Springville and my house would be shaken to the ground and destroyed, and that we needed to escape that destruction before that happened.
Did he claim that to be part of his visions?
Yes,
Did he say anything about concerns he might have had with your wife?
he did.
What did he say?
He'd informed me that she was allowed to go south and that the spirits, in particular, the dark spirits, would allow her to go south to do whatever she wanted to do, but she was not able to come to Idaho to see the glory and the visions that would happen, and that she more or less was being held back.
What did you take that to mean?
I took that to mean that she was being controlled by dark spirits.
How did you react to him telling you that or
I wasn't-
expressing that? Sorry.
I wasn't thrilled
Why not?
because I have a responsibility and a stewardship over my family. That's not Chad's responsibility.
Can you explain to the jury that word stewardship as you're using it? What do you mean by that?
When I'd say the term stewardship, stewardship would be an ownership or a responsibility or something of that nature, that is my duty and my job, my responsibility.
Now, you just use the word ownership. You're not, are you suggesting that you feel like you own your family?
I wouldn't say that I own my family, but I have a responsibility to them.
Is the idea of stewardship something that is mainstream to the LDS Church?
Yes.
Why were you offended by Chad's statements about your wife and dark spirits relative to your stewardship?
I felt that he was trying to take a stewardship over my family and trying to tell us what we needed to do and where we needed to be.
Did you express any concerns to Chad about that?
Not at the time.
Did you ever, I'll withdraw that. I think you explained that there were some times after they moved to Rexburg that you would come up and visit them.
Yes.
Was there ever a time that, I'll withdraw that. When you come to visit, what would Chad tell you?
He would, at that time, we didn't talk in depth about any of the different opportunities to come up there because typically there was another event going on. And he would just explain to me how nice it was and just talk about how things are going up there and that things were wonderful.
Did he ever explain any more about his visions of what was going to happen in Rexburg?
He did. He actually invited me to come up on a trip. I took a day trip, went up there and was shown around Rexburg, was taken to BYU, Idaho. I was taken to other various places throughout town.
Do you remember when that trip was?
That trip would have been in 2016. I think it was the spring.
And what kinds of things was he sharing with you as he took you around Rexburg?
He was showing me that this would be a place of city of light, that there would be a refuge for people to come, that it would be a safe haven, areas of where there would be tent cities, areas of where he would expand his property or take his property and turning it into a tent city.
At that point, did you continue to believe or at least be open-minded to his visions as you had been before?
That was probably the first time after I left that I thought, I'm not supposed to be here.
Any reason why you had that thought?
Just my gut feeling of who I am and what I was doing.
Did you ever express that to Chad?
I just told him that I wasn't going to be coming up. That wasn't for us.
I want to stop here for a few moments and talk a little bit about Tammy. Could you just explain to the jury your relationship with Tammy?
I was Tammy's brother-in-law. I thought she was a sweetheart. She was a kind, gentle person that she really had a lot of people's best interest. She wasn't a saint. None of us are, but she was really, truly an amazing person that just loved people. And in particular, was one that would reach out to touch the individual in my.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It's becoming a bit of a narrative.
Did you get any sense from your interactions with Tammy after they started planning a move to Idaho that this is something that she wanted to do?
Judge, objection, foundation.
I'm asking based on his observations and such, Your Honor.
Overruled.
From what I observed, she wasn't thrilled about going to Idaho.
What made you feel like that without speaking to anything she may have said?
Tammy was a gal that loved to be around her family and liked to be where she was in Springville and had a good relationship with my wife.
Did Tammy also have other family in Springville?
Yes.
Who else was in Springville?
She had cousins, aunts, nieces, and nephews. The majority of my wife's family was there.
And did your family, you and your wife, have a lot of interaction with these extended family members?
Yes.
Did you ever make any observations about the way Chad and Tammy interacted with each other?
I did.
What observations were those?
Some of the observations I had were that they were happy while they were in Springville. They were a loving couple that were kind and nice to each other.
And did that change once they moved to Idaho?
Judge, I'm going to object unless there's some foundation as to how and when he observed the relationship personally.
Same.
Did you have any specific times that you came to Idaho that you observed Chad and Tammy together?
I did.
And when might some of those times have been?
We had opportunity to attend weddings of Chad's children together.
Do you remember approximately what years that happened?
I know there was one in 2018.
Did you make any particular observations in 2018 about Chad and Tammy's interactions with each other?
I felt their interactions were fine and appropriate.
After 2018, during 2018 up until Tammy's passing in 2019, to the best you can recall, can you tell the jury how often were you seeing Chad and Tammy, either in Idaho or Utah?
From what years, excuse me?
The last year of Tammy's life.
We had opportunity to interact with Tammy and Chad at a Christmas party in 2018. After that, the next opportunity that we had to interact with them was in the spring of 2018. They had an opportunity to come down or come to Utah for one of Chad's family functions.
Judge, before an objection, can I have voir dire a native objection?
There's no pending questions, so go ahead, Mr. Rickson.
Thank you. Are there other contacts that you had in that last year that you haven't mentioned yet?
Other contacts that we had that I personally had would not be until Tammy's passing.
So in the 2018 interaction, can you describe what that was?
Chad and his family came down, stayed at our residence. We had an opportunity to sit together in a hot tub with my wife, Tammy, Chad, and myself. Interaction was happening, but Chad seemed withdrawn.
What do you mean by that?
He wasn't engaging in the general conversation of the group.
Was that something that was abnormal for you guys when you'd visit together?
I noted it because it was different.
Did you notice that at the time?
I did.
Did you bring it up with anybody or with Chad?
I didn't bring it up with Chad. Didn't have an opportunity to. I noted it with my wife.
Were there any other interactions that you had in 2018 with Chad and Tammy?
Not that wouldn't be constituted as hearsay, so I would have to say no.
When did you first learn of Tammy's passing?
I was down home running errands. My wife called me and informed me that Tammy had passed away.
What was your reaction when you heard that news?
I was stunned.
Why were you so stunned?
I had seen Tammy 2 weeks prior, and it didn't seem that somebody of her age in her condition should have passed.
Where had you seen her 2 weeks prior?
Tammy came to my house and stayed with my wife and I.
What was the occasion?
On that occasion, she was coming down to visit family and parents.
And you noted that part of why you were stunned was because of Tammy's condition. Will you elaborate on that for the jury, please?
For what I had observed, she was healthy. She seemed happy. She didn't seem to have anything that would cause her to die. Not that I'm an expert in that.
At that point in time, had you noticed whether or not Tammy had put on any significant weight or lost any significant weight?
I did not feel she had changed.
What did you do once you were processing this with respect to hearing of Tammy's death? What was the next thing that you did?
I returned home and gave my wife a big hug. I was devastated, and you don't know what you can do at that time, but you want to do something. And I was in a position that I felt I could coordinate efforts between Chad's family up north, our family down south, our local church congregation. And so I went to work trying to help plan that while a lot of people were just hurting.
Did you plan that with Chad or did you plan it by yourself?
I didn't plan it. I helped coordinate.
At any point after you heard the news, did you talk to Chad?
Yes, I did.
When was that?
I would say around 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock. I don't know the specific time
Of what day?
of October 19th, 2019.
Would that be the day of her passing?
Yes,
And when you say around 11 o'clock, would that be in the morning or in the
in the
evening?
morning.
Did Chad call you or did you call him?
I don't recall. I think I reached out to him.
What kinds of things did you and Chad talk about in that conversation?
We discussed getting in touch with a local mortician where we were at. We discussed getting in touch with the head of the congregation, just arranging the basic things that you would for a funeral.
What, if anything, did he say about his desire for the funeral?
Said he wanted to do it Tuesday, which was a little surprising to me.
Why?
I just felt it was very quick.
Did you talk about the circumstances of Tammy's death?
I asked him what had happened.
What did he say?
He said that he was woken up by her rolling out of bed and that she passed away.
Did you press him for further information?
I just had asked because you want to know what happened, and we talked about it, and the only answer he could give me is, I don't know. I don't know. I left it at that.
In that conversation, did he mention anything about concerns that Tammy had had with her health?
No,
Did he mention any specific ideas that he may have had about her cause of death?
he did not.
And later to that day, well, let me withdraw that. In that conversation, did the topic of an autopsy come up?
Not between he and I.
Did you get a different call later that day?
I did.
From who?
I got a call from Steve Schultz.
What was that in regard to?
Steve Schultz was the local mortician we were coordinating efforts with. And that was in regards to asking if I would assist him in retrieving Tammy and bringing her back to Springville.
Did you do that?
I did.
When did you do that?
We left the following morning, Sunday, early to go pick up Tammy.
Did you go straight to the house?
We first initially went to the Daybell residence.
Who was there?
There was myself, Steve Schultz, both of Chad's parents, Jack Daybell, Sheila Daybell were there, Garth was there, and Chad was there.
Did you have any conversations at that point with Chad?
I did.
Did you make any observations about his demeanor or mood or any of those things?
My observation was that he seemed relatively normal.
What do you mean by that?
And the fact that we had discussions initially of, I'm sorry you lost her, and general greetings.
And why would that be? What was he doing that was abnormal to you?
The thing that was abnormal was I didn't witness a lot of mourning. I did see both and observe both parents upset. Garth and I had conversation in which Garth expressed him being upset. And I had asked Chad if he was okay, and he said, no, I'm fine. I'm all cried out.
Did you continue to discuss funeral arrangements at that point?
Yes.
What kinds of things in terms of arrangements did you discuss with him?
Just when, where, what the timing would be, things that you would do at a funeral.
Was there anything about his demeanor in that exchange that stood out to you?
I would just say that it would just seemed off. And by that, I didn't feel like at the time, I didn't feel like it was normal when someone lost a spouse, but everybody does grieve differently. And so I didn't think any more about it beyond that.
Was there any more talk with Chad about the circumstances of Tammy's death at that point?
No,
Did you then, did you help Mr. Schultz remove the body and take Tammy to the
we
mortuary?
did. We went from there to the funeral home and picked up Tammy, placed her in the vehicle and proceeded to head south.
Do you feel like at any point during that transport or the transport to Utah, did you get a chance to observe Tammy's body?
I didn't get a chance to observe Tammy's body before transporting, no.
Did you after?
After I had an observation of just her area from the shoulders up to observe her face.
And when was that opportunity?
That was when we dropped her off at the funeral home.
Did you make any observations about her at that point?
I didn't make any observations other than I wanted to see if she would be or look appropriate enough that my wife might want to help do her hair and makeup.
After taking her to the Utah mortuary, do you recall, did you attend any viewings for Tammy?
I did.
Which viewings did you attend?
There were 2 viewings associated with her funeral. There was one that was on Monday night, and then there was one before the funeral Tuesday morning.
Did you have any interaction with Chad at the one the night before?
I made attempts. We didn't have a whole lot of exchange. He was busy. I was busy. And so I wanted to try to connect with him, but every opportunity I had, we just missed each other.
Was that necessarily unusual given the circumstances?
I don't feel it was unusual with the circumstances. No,
So is it fair to say at that point you didn't have any concerns about?
no, I didn't.
And then did you attend a viewing the following morning?
I did.
Did you interact with Chad at that point?
Maybe small talk, nothing substantial at that time.
Did you have a chance to observe him at that point as well?
I did.
Did you notice anything during that interaction that caused you any concern?
The family prayer, which is customary at a religious event that we have with a funeral, seemed a little off. He was really shaky and very unsure on his feet and almost just seemed different.
Could you expand on that? When you say off and different, what do you mean?
He was rocking back and forth and side to side and giving the prayer and not crying, but trying to cry is what I felt.
Did you hear the words of his prayer?
I did, but I couldn't recall them right now.
Anything besides what you just explained at the viewing that caused you any concern?
No, I did have chance to observe Tammy in her coffin at various times, and she seemed at rest, peaceful.
And you attended the funeral.
Yes.
Did you make any observations about Chatter's behavior during the funeral?
During the funeral, I was watching one of their grandchildren in the back, and so I did not have opportunity to observe as much as I might like to, and so I did not.
And then after the funeral, did you attend, was there a family luncheon held?
There was.
Where was that held at?
That was held at the same place that we had the funeral.
Was that directly after the funeral or what time frame?
After the funeral, we proceeded to the cemetery where she was interned. And we were there for what I felt like was longer than normal. Considering everybody wanting to visit, I thought, okay, this is fine. We'll stick around for a while. And then after that is when the luncheon occurred down at the church.
Anything that stood out in your mind at the luncheon?
At the luncheon, we all arrived at the church. And while we were there, We were there for probably 25 to 30 minutes waiting for Chad to arrive. Didn't want to start, felt it might be inappropriate if he was not there. And I finally had a phone call that he informed me that he was still running behind and that we should just go ahead and get started without him.
I don't know if I missed this, but did you say how long it took for him to eventually get to the luncheon?
I didn't mention it, but I would say probably an additional 15 minutes.
So how late was he for that?
From the time that we arrived until he arrived, I would have to guess approximately 45 minutes.
Did that cause you any concern?
It didn't seem concerning per se, other than we did want to visit. We did want to have some interaction and talk with him.
Did you get that opportunity?
I did not.
Did you try?
I did.
What was the response from Chad?
The response was, we have a memorial to do tomorrow. We're going to have to load everybody up and we got to go back to Idaho. I felt it was pretty abrupt in the exit.
Was that unusual given the long history you had with Chad and his family?
Given the long history, I felt it was unusual.
After Tammy's funeral, did you notice any change or difference in terms of the relationship that you had with Chad and with his children?
He had taken off for a time. And so immediately after the funeral, within the first 30 days, not necessarily, but I didn't know what to expect following the death of a close loved one.
And if we could help the jury understand, how close were you, if you were at all, with Chad's children before the funeral?
Before the funeral, it wasn't uncommon if we wanted to reach out, text message or phone call to have interaction and conversation with them.
When you said you attended weddings earlier in Rexburg, was it for Chad's children?
Yes,
So did you regularly attend their life events?
we would make every effort that we could.
And the time that they lived in Springville with you, would you say that you had a close relationship or not?
We did, yes.
So how did that relationship change once the funeral was over? Not necessarily immediately, but in the days and weeks following.
The relationship changed primarily after we had learned of other things that had gone on.
We'll come back to that. At some point after the funeral, did you ever reach out to Chad?
I did.
When was that?
I remember reaching out to him approximately 30 days later to call to see how he was doing. I understood that he had spent some time in Hawaii, and I just wanted to do a follow-up to check in on him to see how he was doing with his wife's passing.
What kinds of things did Chad explain to you in that conversation?
In that conversation, I was informed, or I was actually asked, have I been speaking with Heather Daybell? That was the first thing he mentioned on the phone call.
Did you find that unusual?
Yes, I did.
Why?
Because I wanted to talk to him and not about Heather Daybell.
And so the jury understands, was Heather Daybell someone that you had a close relationship with?
No,
How are you related to Heather Daybell, just to put it in perspective?
to put it in perspective, Chad's brother Matt married Heather, making her Chad's sister-in-law. And so at these family functions, if it was extended, we would see her. We were cordial. I didn't have anything against her, but we weren't close by any means.
Did you ever, in that phone call that you made to Chad a month after the funeral, did you ever ask him why he was asking if you talked to Heather?
Conversation was such that he asked if I had been talking to Heather Daybell, and I said no. He had said, well, she's spreading rumors about me in Rexburg, Idaho. So I asked why. And he said, well, it's not important, but while I was in Hawaii, I got married.
Was that the first time that you learned that he'd been married?
Yes,
Were you surprised by that?
very.
Why?
Because it is not common to marry somebody. At that time, I thought within a month, maybe, of a wife passing, when he was as close as he was to his spouse.
Did you find it in any way unusual or not with respect to the fact that all this history of years of closeness with Chad that he hadn't told you before this, that he got married?
We hadn't had opportunity to talk, so this is the first opportunity to talk. I'm not surprised that that was what he would tell me.
How did you react to that when he said that?
I remember literally standing there and just not knowing what to say.
Did you eventually speak?
Yes, I did.
What did you say to him and ask him about?
I asked him the first thing that came to my mind, which is, who is she?
What did he say?
He told me her name was Lori Ryan.
Had you ever heard that name before?
I had not.
Did he tell you in that conversation when he had married Lori Ryan?
In that conversation, he did not. He just explained who she was.
Did he describe her in any way, tell you anything about her?
He did.
What kinds of things did he tell you?
He explained that she was 5'6", 120 pounds, blonde, worked out, physically fit, hairdresser, and just an amazing individual.
Did he mention anything about her family background?
He had mentioned that her husband had died of a heart attack earlier in 2019.
Did he say anything about her children, if she had children or didn't have children?
I asked him if he had children, and he said that she had some grown children, but that was it.
At that point, had you ever heard of JJ and Tylee's names?
No.
Anything else in that conversation that stood out to you?
In particular, nothing that was of note other than I was still trying to process that he had been married, and I wanted to know when he had gotten married, but he had not shared that with me.
In the days that followed, did you have another conversation with Chad?
We did.
When was the next conversation?
The next conversation was a day or two later. I'm not specific on what day it was.
And what was that conversation about?
The conversation for me was mainly trying to find out information of when did you get married?
So did you call him? Did he call you?
I called him.
Did you call and ask him that question?
I did.
What did he say?
He informed me at that point that he had been married on November 5th.
Did he say anything else about his marriage?
Not a lot about the marriage itself.
I want to back up. Back on November 19th, did Chad ever ask you to do anything about this information that he'd been married?
You know, when he did share that information with me, the one item that was a little surprising was that he asked me not to tell anybody.
Did he give you an explanation as to why he didn't want you to tell anybody?
He just said, don't let anyone know. And I informed them he needed to call our in-laws and let them know. And he just didn't give him information. He didn't give a reason.
So then going forward to that phone call and you had a couple of days later, did he say anything about how his kids had reacted to the marriage?
He did.
What did he say?
He informed me that his kids knew that he was going to be getting married before he went to Hawaii.
And what was your thought at that point?
My thought was, and I did ask him, how did they keep that a secret? And one of the answers the answer troubled me because he said, my kids are good at keeping secrets.
Did he explain what he meant by that at all?
No, he didn't.
Was there anything else of note in that particular conversation?
I wouldn't say there was anything of note. I was just still trying to process that I learned the date of the marriage, which was roughly 2 weeks after the funeral. And I just remember in my mind thinking that's incredibly quick. I didn't feel it appropriate.
When's the next time in your memory that you had contact with Chad?
The next time we had contact with Chad was the day, I want to say it was the day that Tammy was exhumed.
And how did that contact occur?
Contact occurred where he reached out and sent me a text message telling us that he needed to speak with me and my wife, Samantha.
And did you talk to him?
We did.
Did you call him? Did he call you?
I think that when my wife returned home that she reached out on her phone and put us on speakerphone with him.
Do you recall at least approximately when the day that Tammy was exhumed?
I want to say it was the 13th of December, but I could be wrong.
So when you spoke to him on this occasion, what specifically did you talk about?
There were more conversation between him, my wife, and he, as there was to he and I. However, we were all on a speakerphone together, and it was a conversation in which he had asked us if we had it known that Tammy was exhumed and had we been responsible for that.
And I just want to invite you in these questions, just speak to what you heard from Chad, not what your wife may have said, okay?
Sure, of course.
So what did he say about it, if anything?
He wanted to know if we knew that she had been exhumed. He wanted to know if we had any responsibility for her being exhumed. And in both cases, we did not. We did not know anything about it.
Did he explain at all why he wanted to know if you had responsibility for that?
No.
What else did he ask or say to you?
During that conversation, there was a lot, but I probably couldn't testify to much of that at this point.
Did he have any comments that he made to you in regard to Tammy in that conversation?
He did have conversation regarding Tammy.
What did he say about Tammy?
In conversation regarding Tammy, the thing that stood out was that he had mentioned the day of the funeral that she had appeared to him and told him that it was time to move on.
How did you take that?
I took it to mean that if she did have conversation and told him it was time to move on, that likely it didn't mean within 2 weeks.
Why did he mention that? Was there any reason in that conversation?
I don't know why he mentioned that.
Did Heather's name come up again in that phone call?
In that phone call, I don't know. I can't testify that did or not.
Your Honor, given the time, does the court want me to continue or do we stop for a break?
You can continue on another 5 or 10 minutes, Mr. Wixom. Thank you.
Thank you. At some point in time after that, did you ever get a call from law enforcement?
Yes, I did.
When did that occur?
That occurred approximately December 18th, 2019.
And do you remember who it was that contacted you?
I don't specifically remember, but that they requested they wanted to meet with me.
And did you do that?
We did. Yes, I did.
Where did you meet with them at?
I met with them at the Springville Police Department.
Did they explain to you what they wanted to meet with you about?
Not until I arrived.
When you got there, what was your understanding of what this was about?
When I arrived, my understanding was that there were 2 missing kids that were affiliated with Lori and Chad,
What were the names of the kids that you learned about?
JJ and Tylee.
And did they explain to you why they were asking you about?
They did.
What did they say?
They had informed me that they were children of Lori's, that these children have gone missing, that they had asked for a wellness check on the children, and that they had not been able to find them.
Did that cause you any concerns?
Yes, it did.
What were the concerns?
The concerns were primarily that in previous conversation, Chad had told me that Lori did have children, but that they were older, that they were not minor children, and that these children were missing and affiliated with the 2 of them.
In that conversation with law enforcement, did you learn anything else that was concerning to you?
I think I took away primarily that that was probably the biggest concern. The other concern might be that they weren't able to get in touch with them, that they weren't getting communication from them.
Do you recall approximately the date that this happened?
I believe it was December 18th.
And do you happen to recall the names of any of the law enforcement that were with you?
We're law enforcement from, I recall the agencies. There were law enforcement agencies from the FBI, the Madison County Sheriff's Department, Fremont County Sheriff's Department, and I believe Rexburg Police Department was there as well.
And during that conversation, did law enforcement ask you to do anything?
They didn't ask me to do anything specifically.
Did you do something to try to help them?
I did.
What did you do?
I told them that I'll call Chad, find out where he's at, what's going on.
Did you mean that you would do it right then and there?
Sure, why not?
In fact, did you do it right then and there?
I did.
To the best that you understand, was law enforcement listening to that conversation?
They were.
Have they informed you that they were going to record it?
I asked them to record it.
When you called, did Chad answer?
Yes, he did.
Your Honor, at this time, that was some preparatory foundation, but I need to request the court the opportunity to play maybe the first 30 to 60 seconds of the recording to lay further foundation. And I don't know if you want me to do that now or do it after a break.
If it's submitted, how long is this recording?
It's 11 minutes.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take the recess and then we can see if the recording gets admitted or not after that.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take our mid-morning recess then, about 25 minutes or so. So 25 after, we'll come back on with additional testimony.
All right, please. Here's our president for you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. Okay, we're back on the record on CR 22-21-16-23, State of Idaho versus Chad Daybell. Mr. Gwilliam is on the stand, has been placed under oath, and Mr. Wixom, you can continue with direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Gwilliam, just for clarity, since we had a break, I believe that one of the last things you said about this phone call was that you had asked law enforcement to record it. Is that what I heard?
Correct.
Why did you ask that from law enforcement?
I wanted to know if there was going to be any answers that would help to find the two missing kids that they were inquiring about. And I thought it would be helpful that if there was information given that would assist in that. I thought it'd be good to record it.
And in the conversation, who literally participated in the conversation?
There was myself, Chad Daybell, and Lori Daybell.
Nobody else comes into the conversation?
I don't believe so.
If in fact, have you recently heard that conversation?
Recently, yes.
If you did have the opportunity to listen to the very early portion of the conversation, would that be something that you could recognize and identify?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state has state's proposed Exhibit 308, which is a recording of that phone call. We would seek to have the opportunity to play the first portion for this witness to help identify it. And for clarity, we will be offering it under 801 D2.
All right, if you want to play just a very limited amount, enough to lay some foundation for the witness, and then don't publish anything more than that, Mr. Wixom.
Thank you, Judge. I would ask for 30 to 60 seconds. And Your Honor, I don't know if Madam Clerk needs to do anything. I did connect the HDMI, so I intend to play it through the She did. Sir, I'm going to play a very small portion of the phone call and then ask you if you're able to identify it.
Hello. Chad, what's going on?
Message.
You got, all right, what the heck is going on? I got people coming down from Rexburg.
Mr. Wixom, I think that's probably enough.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Gwilliam, do you recognize the voices in that call?
Yes,
Do you recognize that recording?
yes, I do.
Do you believe that that's the actual phone call that you engaged in that you've already been testifying to the jury about?
I believe that it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would seek to admit State's Exhibit 308.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
All right, exhibit 308 is admitted and you may publish if you request, Mr. Wixom.
Thank you, Your Honor, I do. Sir, I'm going to continue to play this call. I may stop at points and ask you some questions.
They're wanting to talk to us.
What?
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm like, I don't know if I want to talk to you guys and yeah, I have people wanting to question and talk to me about you and what you got going on and I'm like, okay, why? And so I thought I need to reach out and find out.
Her lawyer's here, so let me just put that speaker.
Okay, sure.
So go ahead and state what is happening so she can hear.
I have people calling me from Rexburg saying, we want to bring you in for questioning and talk to you about what's been going on and we're trying to find some kids. And what do you know about it? And I'm going, I don't know anything. What, why, what? Okay, no, I don't know what's going on. And so,
Yesterday, they actually went to Leah's house and tried to threaten her. We're not fully sure what they're trying to accomplish. It's mainly one detective in Rexburg.
okay,
So finally, we got a hold of an attorney and that's pretty much where it goes from here. It's just,
just everything to the attorney and stuff. Okay.
yeah, just, we can text you his name and
Yeah, probably should.
Mr. Gwilliam, I'm going to pause there. You just heard yourself in the audio saying you probably should contact an attorney. Did I get that correct?
On that one, they had mentioned, or he had mentioned to me that they had an attorney they retained. And I wanted to get the name of the attorney so that I could then pass it on to law enforcement. And that was the purpose of that.
Okay. And the voices that we've heard so far, we've heard your voice. Just for clarity, who's the other voice?
The other voice is Chad Daybell.
say who you need to.
You know me, I don't deal with a lot of this stuff very well. I'm just like, okay, I'm a simple dude. What's going on? What do you guys want to do? What's happening? What's going on?
Go your route. I don't know how you would even be involved.
I have no idea. They're just trying to go through and just kind of see if I know anything about anything going on. And I'm like, no, why would I? Talk to me. Tell me what's going on. Well, we're trying to find two kids that along with Lori, and we just want to know if they're being, sheltered down in Utah. And I'm like, what? I don't have any idea what you're talking about. So is there kids that are not involved or what are they talking about? So I'll have a clue if they show up at my house.
If they show up, you can just give them the attorney's name and say, we're not talking to you without an attorney.
Okay.
Because
No,
they're,
well,
it's my sister-in-law. It's just a bunch of people that are starting trouble for no reason.
It's separate from the Tammy situation.
well,
Mr. Gwilliam, you just heard that reference to the Tammy situation. What did you take that to mean from Chad when he said that?
when he said the Tammy situation, I can only, the fact that he had buried her soon, married Lori as quickly as he did. I don't know that it would be a situation, and I don't know what he means by situation in that, at that point.
Would it be fair to say at that point in time that you didn't have any knowledge of any investigation related to Tammy?
I didn't know of anything.
And had Chad ever discussed anything like that with you in any of the prior phone calls?
Let me backtrack slightly. Possibly the Tammy situation could be in reference to him calling previously to ask about her exhumation.
They're trying to combine it all together.
Well, do you want to send me that attorney's number? Do you want to text it to me or?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can do that, that would be helpful, I'm sure. So,
They're just grasping at straws. I still feel Heather Daybell's behind it.
okay.
Just, she's an evil woman and
It's her in-law that's this
yeah,
officer. Who,
Detective Hope.
yeah, did he call?
Just to inquire, at that point in time, had Heather Daybell contacted you about any of this?
At that point in time, I don't know that Heather and I had conversation about that. I can't recall.
You?
No,
Was it
he didn't call me. It was another individual. And so, yeah, that's where I'm like, okay, this is getting a little bit weird here. And so I thought I'd
It
reach out
is.
to you to find out, you know, what's going on. And so,
So
Anyway.
we pretty much blocked them. It's a simple situation, but we just can't tell you because then you'd have to be involved.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
I get it. That's fine. So at that point, they're talking about bringing down like a host of like FBI people involved and stuff.
You just heard Chad describe the situation as a simple situation.
Correct.
Then he said, I can't tell you because I don't want to get you involved.
That was what was stated.
And you said, okay, I understand. What did you mean by that comment?
At that point, I felt that it possibly was a smaller situation. I didn't know what the situation was. And so at that stage, I think he was just trying to keep me out of the loop. And I'm like, I don't
Just a-
want, you know, I don't need that. It's Christmas. So, you know, that's where I'm just going, all right, that's interesting. So, okay.
Well, you don't know anything, which
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah.
You don't know anything.
No, I don't know anything. And so that's good news at that point in time. So, okay.
I don't know how they would have done that other than Heather. She knows our friendship.
Oh, sure. No, of course. And so, yeah. And that's where I was like, yeah, maybe I better get a heads up about what they might have to say or what's going to happen or what they're talking about doing. And so if you've got that name on that, I'll just say, hey, look, you know what, you may just want to go talk to these people. I don't need to, you know, be involved in the whole thing. So,
I'll text you the attorney's name. He's a calm, collected individual. We're happy with him, but
gotcha. So
It's-
on that, it just,
We get everybody that we know, it's just so dumb.
so on that, is this an attorney that's just, is he out where you're at? Is he local? How would I, if I needed to?
he's in Rexburg.
He's a Rexburg attorney? Okay,
Yeah.
I gotcha. So,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
It's Rexburg police who are being whatever.
yeah, they've
It's
gone,
Heather's in-law
right.
is this detective that's bugging everybody, so.
Yeah. They seem to think that there's stuff that's being hidden and that they're wanting to try to get to the bottom of what's being hidden. And I'm like, if you know, I don't know what your guys are talking about. It kind of catches you off guard when you have them call you up and start chatting with you. And you're going, okay, I don't know anything about this stuff here. And so, yeah.
This is a different issue that doesn't involve any Douglases.
Okay. Well, with that being the case, that's fine. I just thought
We're
it,
sorry that you're being bothered.
no,
We're
it's
sorry
fine.
you're being bothered.
I think they're just trying to,
Just to be clear, Mr. Gwilliam, who are the Douglases that are being referenced?
that would be in reference to my wife's family. We all lived within a close proximity to each other.
Is Douglas your wife and Tammy's maiden name?
Yes, it is. Just go down every possible route and road that they can, I suppose. And so,
And so if they happen to bother Ron and Phyllis or anybody, just the same attorney.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you'll get me that information, that would be helpful with regards to that. So. that
Yep,
way-
I'll text it to you.
Bartholic, Sean Bartholic.
Yeah, it's a
is his
weird name.
What, Sean what? Bark?
Bartholic.
Oh, Bartholic. Okay. Barth. Yeah, that is a little different.
essentially, but
Yeah, that works out just fine, so.
this detective is Matt and Heather's daughter's father-in-law.
Oh, okay, so there's a relation to
No,
Heather with regards to
Hey,
everything.
or what? He is
We don't
just
know if
so
he's getting paid
persistent.
off or what, but he's bugging everybody we know for
It's
no reason.
basically a
And he won't even
custom-
call us. He doesn't call us ever to ask us any questions. He's just trying to get information from anybody else that will give him information.
Sweet, so should I tell him to call you and you'll give him the information so they'll leave me alone?
Yes.
All right, maybe I'll do that. If they say come over, I'll say, hey, you got their number, call them. You know, and so.
It's like he's circling us rather than talking directly.
So he's
Exactly.
basically taking every angle possible and trying to come in and chat with you guys rather than just saying, hey, pick up the phone, call you and you'll chat with him. Nice.
I changed this number
What,
and
Don?
Garth gave him my number 3 weeks
They've
ago.
had the numbers.
Oh, no kidding. Well,
And just won't call me.
I'll just tell him, pick up the phone and call the guy. Hello, it's not that hard, you know, reach out and touch someone. So
I'll probably just start with the attorney's
I'll
number.
just say,
at this
here, you
point.
know what, go talk to Mark or whatever you are at. And so, anyway,
Yeah.
so.
You can say that. You can say that, we've been instructed by our family attorney to not speak to any police, and here's his number. You can contact him. And that he can cover the whole entire family.
Okay.
Jason, at that point, from your perspective, did you see any need not to talk to police?
I did not see a need for them not to communicate with the police.
Did you personally have any concerns if the police were going to interact with you about this issue?
No.
We heard the name Ron and Phyllis. Who is that?
Ron and Phyllis are Chad and I's in-laws.
No, that's fine. So you guys,
By our family attorney. This is his name, so here you go.
well, no, that's fine. That's what I'll do at that point.
Just to all your family.
And then I'll just turn around and say, by the way, if you want to just pick up the phone and call him, why don't you? So
Right.
anyway, that's,
That's what I told him.
oh, did he? Oh, so are the kids, what are their plans for Christmas then? Are they just gonna be hunkered down? Are they back in Rexburg at home?
Emma's gonna stay. Garth and Leah are gonna go on a little vacation.
Okay, are they,
At that point in time, Mr. Gwilliam, when you said, are the kids going to be back in Rexburg, which kids were you referring to?
I was referring to my nieces and nephews, Chad's children.
At that point in time, did you have any information or ideas where JJ and Tylee were?
I had no idea.
Did you have any information at that point about where Chad and Lori were?
I did.
Did it come from Chad?
I don't recall who it came from, whether it was through him or through his children. I don't recall.
going before, we were talking, I do that trip every year that I take the kids on.
Right.
That I just get away beforehand. And I actually thought about going up to the hardware ranch and I was gonna call Garth and say, hey, everybody else is married. Why don't you come go to the hardware ranch and have a square or something with us?
I think they're gonna leave the 23rd, so
Oh, okay. That would put him,
then
Well-
Seth's gonna head out to. I think Garth's actually going down this weekend to.
I
talk
did hear he was coming down. He was gonna be down. They didn't make it last week and I guess it snowed quite a bit or I don't know what
Yeah.
happened. I don't wanna drive the Moab Pass in a snowstorm either, so,
Or,
yeah.
So anyway, in terms of Tammy's autopsy or whatever, I did talk to, you probably heard from Ron and Phyllis how that went.
Yeah, I did. Well, I didn't. Samantha did, and I haven't been home to get a chance to chat with her about it all yet. And so,
One day last Wednesday, a week ago, I haven't heard a thing.
oh, no
That's the
kidding.
thing, because I have not heard a thing. If Lori and I didn't hear through relatives, we would have no idea.
No, and that surprised me because someone had said, "Hey, go check out the cemetery," and I'm going, "Okay, why? I don't go to the cemetery. I'm not the former Chad Daybell, the guy that digs up." And so I go over and I'm like, where's the grass?" And of course, Samantha at that point, okay, what's going on? I don't know. I don't know. So when we talked to you last week, I hadn't heard anything, and then a couple of days later, people are going, "Hey, there's stuff going on around here. You may want to go take a look." Okay, that'd be good to know. So anyway, yeah. What do you got planned for Christmas then? Anything good? Did I lose you? Oh, are you there?
Hello?
Oh, there you are. I say, as far as Christmas goes, what do you got planned then on that?
We're gonna stay where we're at for now.
I think it's breaking up on me. What was that?
We're not going to Idaho.
No, you don't want to go to Idaho, so that's for sure. He's gonna be hanging out doing I'm just curious to know how Mele Kalikimaka Hawaiian Christmas works out, so. I guess I'm just jealous more than anything else. So. Anyway, did I lose you? Think I lost you. I lost you.
Mr. Gwilliam, I'm just, again, having listened to the full audio, is there any reason for you to think that that audio was altered in any way?
I don't believe it was.
You captured the full conversation.
Yes, sir.
What did you mean when you told Chad, you don't want to go to Idaho? What was your reference about that?
He had informed me that basically he didn't want to have to talk to cops face to face. He'd rather just them call. And so I just making small talk at that point.
At that point in time, or any time subsequent to that, I'm sorry, did you ever talk to Chad again?
That was the last communication Chad and I ever had.
Ever had? There's
Yeah.
no other communication. Why is that?
Couldn't tell you.
Did you make efforts to reach out?
There was another time after the first of the year that I made an effort to make a phone call and it was unsuccessful.
The number that you called, was that the same phone number that you had been calling for this call, for example?
Yes.
When you say unsuccessful, did nobody answer? Were there voicemails? I mean, what
I
do you mean?
couldn't testify to, I can't recall.
You just didn't contact them.
Right.
Do you ever recall any follow-up, missed calls back from Chad to your phone, any emails, any text messages?
No.
And at some point, did you learn of where JJ and Tylee had been found?
I did.
Your Honor, I have no further questions. And for the record, I have States Exhibit 308 as played. I'd like to give back to the marshal.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wixom. All right, once you're ready, cross Mr. Pryor.
Thank you, Judge. Morning, Mr. Gwilliam.
Morning, Mr. Pryor.
Mr. Gwilliam, you had mentioned that you were a close brother-in-law with Chad from approximately 1997 to 2015. You recall that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And during that time, were both of you well, let me rephrase that, Judge. During that time, both of you were involved in your LDS faith in Springville, Utah. Would that be fair?
Chad and I attended the same ward. Yes.
Okay. And that's what I was getting at.
Yes.
And as far as your participation in that ward, did either of you hold any positions of authority or deference in that ward during that time?
Yes.
And which positions were those, sir?
I don't recall specifics. I can tell you to speak to Chad, and I want to preface this by saying absolutely loved Chad. Was an amazing individual. He served as a counselor in our bishopric as well as a president of the Elders Quorum, which is an organization group of men.
Okay. So he held a bit of a prominent position within the church from 97 to 2015.
I would say at various times throughout that, yes, not all at the same time.
And during the same time, he was writing these books that you expressed some concern about, correct?
He was starting to write the books at that time frame.
Well, 2006, he started writing the books is what you recall. Is that correct?
I would say yes,
And he was writing those throughout 2015. Is that correct?
he was.
Okay. And there were no concerns at this point. These were just topics of interest that Chad expressed in and wrote about in his books. Would that be fair?
At the time, yes.
Okay. And then he moved in 2015 to the Rexburg area. And are you aware if he continued to write these books?
From my understanding, he continued to publish his books at that time.
And as a close friend of his, are you aware that he continued his activities and participation in the LDS faith up until the incidents that involve this case?
Objection, counsel's testifying.
Sustain.
Are you aware of whether he continued to participate in his LDS faith up until the facts that led to this particular case?
My
Objection,
understanding
that's
is
the
he
same
did.
answer, Your Honor, or same question, Your Honor.
Overruled. You can answer.
Yes, he continued to publish books.
And you described how and you described how the relationship in Springville between Chad and Tammy was a relatively normal marital relationship. Do you recall that?
They had what I would consider a normal marital relationship. Yes.
And your testimony previously was that up and through 2018, that marital relationship, from your observations, continued to be relatively the same.
I didn't observe them as much when they were in Idaho as I did when they were in Utah. But from my perspective and what I observed, I would agree.
Okay. And I'd like to go over a little bit of the time frame from 2015, the frequency with which you had contact with Tammy and Chad from 2015 forward. You mentioned a couple of family events. What else was there? Let's start with like 2015. Do you have any specific recollection of what you may have participated in with both Tammy and Chad in 2015?
In 2015, we did not go to Idaho.
Okay.
They would come down to Springville quite often. They still had some medical things going on with regards to kids and braces, things that would carry over from one area to another. And so that we would see them more in 2015 when they would attend and come south to where we were.
Okay. And in 2016?
2016 was when I got a letter censuring me to say, hey, this is what you need to be doing. And so we did take the opportunity in 2016 to visit more often.
Okay. And how often, when you say more often, how often is that?
I would say during 2016, we probably went up there 3 to 4 times.
Okay.
And again, they would continue to come down south and visit us down there.
And was that a frequent visit down to, or up, down to Springville?
There was back and forth. Probably we would engage in physical seeing of each other, likely once a month.
Okay. And then again in 2017?
In 2017, I don't recall, but a lot of similar activity continued.
Okay. 2018?
In 2018, there were some weddings, mission farewells, of which we went north. They did, again, come down south for just various activities. There was a family Christmas party, and there were times that we would get together for various reasons.
And you mentioned something, at least my notes reflect that there was an event in spring of 2018.
Spring of 2018. I don't know that it was, let's see, spring of 2018. I don't think it was spring of 2018.
Okay.
Excuse me. No, I'm not going to testify to that. I don't recall.
Okay. And then there was a Christmas party in 2018, correct?
There was.
That was that 2018 going into 2019, or was it 2017 going into 2018?
It was 2018 going into 2019.
And nothing particular. Again, the relationship between, at least what you observed, seemed to be relatively similar to what you've experienced.
From my observation, yes.
Okay. All right. And Chad still engaged with his children, still engaged with Tammy, engaged with the extended family as well, correct?
Typically, when Chad would engage with the extended family, it was more he and I going off, communicating, having conversation about various things in life going on.
Okay. And then what your what I understand you're saying is after 2018, after Christmas, that's when you may have observed some changes. Is that fair?
I would say in 2019, we did not see them as much.
Okay. But to your knowledge, Chad continued to publish his books.
To the best of my knowledge, he continued with his book company.
And when we talk about, and were you aware about what Tammy's involvement was in regards to the publishing company?
I knew what she was involved in when she was in Springville.
Okay. You didn't have an occasion to delve into how she participated or what her participation was in the publishing company. Is that right?
Not when they were in Idaho. I just didn't observe that.
Okay. Now, I want to go to the interview that you talked about when you were contacted by law enforcement to be interviewed. And can you give me the date of that again?
Which time? The time when I went initially?
I believe it was at the Springville Police Department around December 18th.
That sounds accurate.
Okay. Do you recall who was there for that?
Again, I can testify to agencies. I can't tell you individual people.
Okay. Did those agencies, when you were there, identify who they were?
They did.
Okay. And which agencies?
The agencies that I recall would have been FBI,
Okay.
Springville Police Department, because they were hosting. There were individuals from Rexburg, meaning I don't know if it was police department or Madison County. And there were Fremont County representatives.
Okay. And when you say representatives, were those all police officers?
From my recollection, I believe they were all police officers.
Okay. No one represented themselves as anything other than a police officer at that time?
At that time, it was represented as law enforcement.
Okay. I'm going to have you look to my left, and the gentleman sitting at the seat with the red tie, do you recognize him?
I do.
And he was there at that time for the interview.
Objection as to relevance, Your Honor.
Overruled.
He was there at that time during the interview of you as well, correct?
I couldn't recall whether he was there or not.
Okay. But needless to say, nobody at that meeting identified themselves as a prosecutor of any agency at that point. Did you recall that?
At that meeting, there were individuals that were speaking. At that point, they did not represent whether they were law enforcement, whether the only one that stood out that seemed different to me was an individual that claimed to be with FBI. And I thought that was different just because you don't normally deal with the FBI.
Okay. Now, during the call that you recorded, I heard reference to a family attorney.
Yes, sir.
You heard that as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you get the impression from the phone call that, or did you get the impression that the suggestion was that this was a family matter?
I got the impression that there was a civil situation going on because of two missing kids, and they gave me an attorney's number to go ahead and contact them. And so for it being civil, criminal, at the time, I didn't know the difference, didn't care. I wanted to know about two kids.
Okay, but you did hear the reference by one of those folks, Chad or Lori, about it being a family attorney, correct?
I heard the reference to it being attorney, whether family or not, I heard attorney.
Okay. Would it help you to refresh your recollection by listening to the tape?
Not necessarily. If you're
Okay.
saying that's what you heard, then we can do that. We can go there.
Okay. And did you hear a reference that about Garth giving them the number to contact Chad and Lori?
It was either, I think it was Garth that was given the number a few weeks earlier.
Okay. And a few weeks earlier from this recording would have been when?
I would probably, and this is a guess because I can't say and can't testify to it, but I would anticipate that it would be around the time of an exhumation.
Okay. And in regards to the exhumation,
Big word.
Yeah, for me, it is.
Well, big word bonus for both of us.
Okay. In regards to the exhumation, did you have any information as to the length of time or how long that process took?
Not until it was mentioned by Chad in the phone call,
Okay.
what was involved, I had no idea.
Were you aware that the exhumation was just a one-day situation?
Objection, counsel is testifying, Your Honor.
Sustain.
Do you have any knowledge about the length of the exhumation
Currently or previous or what time?
right now?
Currently, I understand that it was a process that took 24 hours, I presume.
And according to the tape, what you understand, was it your understanding that Chad was not informed of that process until afterwards?
I don't think that anybody in the family was informed about the process, so it wouldn't surprise me that he wasn't either.
Okay. And the information you have is that you folks weren't advised of it, correct?
Negative, we were not.
And as far as you know, Tammy's mother and father weren't apprised of it, were they?
My understanding is that nobody within the realm of the Douglas family was advised of what was taking place.
And as far as the Daybell family, can you speak to that?
I can't speak for the Daybell
Okay.
family.
There was some mention of a detective who was related to Heather Daybell. Do you recall hearing that on the tape?
There was, Chad identified him, if you listened closely enough, Detective Hope.
Detective Hope?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And do you recall what the relation is between Detective Hope and Heather Daybell?
The relation as he described it was Chad's brother, Matt, and Heather had a daughter, and that their daughter married Detective Hope's son. Little convoluted, little long way around to get to the relationship there. That's my understanding.
Well, it's not unusual, and as an example, Springville, Utah is a very tight knit. You know what I'm going to say.
I know where you're going. Yes.
Very tight knit community.
Sure.
Very deeply faith LDS community.
I would say that it is.
Okay. And in regards to Rexburg, St. Anthony, Salem, same thing. Very, very tight knit community.
My understanding is that they're very similar communities. Yes.
Right. And it's not unusual to have extended relatives and that everybody, for lack of a better word, everybody knows everybody else.
There are a lot of people that talk in smaller towns. I would agree with you on that.
Okay. Okay. Now, at the time, Chad made a comment, it's a simple situation. Do you recall him saying that on the tape?
It's on the tape.
Okay. And that discussion of a simple situation, what did you take that to mean?
I'll be honest, I don't know what he meant by a simple situation at that time.
Could it have been that he was merely reflecting that they had a family law attorney and that the family law attorney was going to take care of the simple situation?
I think it could have been any number of things
Okay.
at that point in time. There was a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of information starting to come out that didn't make a lot of sense.
Okay. There was also some mention of an officer allegedly harassing Leah. Did you hear that?
Yes, it sounds to me like there was an officer that may have been communicating with her, or in his terms, harassing her. I don't know what that was about.
And Leah is who?
Leah would be Chad's third child, second daughter.
And Leah lived where?
At that time, my understanding is she would have lived up in Idaho.
There's a discussion of Steve Schultz. And you know Steve Schultz.
I do know Steve Schultz.
Now, is there some, I don't know how to say this. Is there some familial relationship with Steve Schultz in your family?
I am not related to Steve Schultz.
But you would describe him as a close friend
Steve Schultz is a close friend of mine. Yes,
and a close friend to Chad's as well.
absolutely.
And both of you know him quite well.
We have known Steve for probably 12, 15 years. I'd say he's a good friend, good man.
Honorable man.
Yes.
The time that you came up to Rexburg for the visit, you recall talking about that with the prosecuting attorney?
Which visitor you're referencing?
The one where I think it was shortly after 2015, where you came up and were looking around and Chad took you over to be.
It would have been in 2016.
2000,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 2016.
Please make sure to not talk at the same time as each other.
Thank
Wait
you.
for his question to be finished. Thank you.
And as soon as I said that, I realized I did exactly what the judge told me not to do. So I'm going to slow down. So you went to the BYU campus at that point.
We did.
Did you happen to go to the BYU library?
I don't recall going to the BYU library. Specifically, he wanted to point out to me the conference center that was new on campus. But as far as the library goes, I don't recall if we went there or not.
Did you have any knowledge as to whether Chad made it an occasion to go to the BYU library on a regular basis?
I don't know what his habits were with that.
Okay. And Judge, could I just have a moment, may I?
You may.
And at the time when you showed up to see Chad at Tammy's passing, you went there obviously with Mr. Schultz, correct?
I did.
And at that point, Chad had indicated to you that he was all cried out. Is that right?
That was the expression, or as close to the expression that he used with me that I can recall.
Okay. And when he did the family prayer, was it your understanding that he wanted to cry, he just wasn't crying?
I wasn't sure what he was doing at that moment. It
Okay.
didn't seem as conventional as I thought
Okay.
from my perspective.
Have you read any of his books?
I've had occasion to read a few of his books, yes.
And do you understand those books to be fiction or nonfiction?
When I first read them, my understanding is that they were stories that he had just made up. I later come to understand, and he told me that these were based on events that were to occur,
With some literary license, correct?
likely.
Embellishment in any event, correct?
Mm, I would presume so under the circumstances.
So if, when you read his books initially, you felt that they were just nonfiction, correct?
Just a simple reading, yeah.
And then you discovered that he has a pattern when he writes books, he draws from personal experiences, correct?
He has a tendency to draw from personal experiences, bring personal characters into based on people that he knows and or has an interaction with.
Right. He wrote a book about his, boy, she'll kill me if I say this, the oldest daughter, Emma.
Yes, sir.
There was a series about Emma. Is that right?
That were based loosely around. I think that's correct. Yeah.
And that was consistent with his pattern to write books and then either embellish or take some literary license, correct?
I would think that at first he wanted that to be the case, but as he explained to me, these are things that are going to be occurring and that will happen. I would say the literary licenses would come with who the characters are.
Right.
And what the character development, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know for sure.
And on this issue, you talked a little bit about visions and some of these events that took place. Is that something, having visions and expressing those beliefs, something that's inconsistent with the LDS faith?
I would say with the general LDS faith of the general membership, that to have visions and to share them publicly is not something that's very common.
But to have visions?
I would think that people receive inspiration and guidance for themselves. I don't know that you would constitute them as visions, and I wouldn't say that everybody does. But I can't speak for a general populace of several million.
So, and that's fair.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it's not the having guidance or having some inspiration or divine vision. What you have issue with, if I understand, is the expressing and telling people about those respective visions. Is that fair?
I would say that most people don't have expressive visions. I would think that that's not really the case. I would think that people have general inspiration with regards to their lives and what they might do, but probably not express them as much.
Okay.
And I can't speak for what everybody does. I don't know.
And to recoup a little bit, when you talk about Chad's books, when he's talking about individual characters, that's where you see him embellishing or taking literary license. Would that be fair?
I wouldn't say embellishing so much as literary license, in that you're going to change their name. You can't use somebody's specific name necessarily. Change their name, put him in a character position of whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe for purposes of trying to sell the books, maybe flavor the stories a little bit so that they're a little more marketable, correct?
I can't speak to what he does. I did talk with him about his books often, and in cases of where it was at, he would finally tell me, no, these are how things are going to go. This is what's going to happen. These are how the characters are going to be. It was, I don't know. I don't know what his end result was with it other than sell books. Sure.
But in terms of the predictions and the visions, that was him where he had a faith and belief in that, correct?
I think he did. I
Okay,
think he
but in
felt that
term-
was a direct, sorry,
No, I interrupted you.
you're good.
But in terms of the actual individual characters, that's where you could expand on things and make it more marketable, correct?
If you're going public with something like that, possibly.
Okay, all right. Judge, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Pryor. Redirect, Mr. Wixom.
Thank you. Mr. William, you were asking a number of questions about a number of topics.
Yes, I was.
Do you recall questions about whether or not you had been informed about Tammy's exhumation?
I do recall.
As you sit there today, are you concerned at all that you weren't informed about Tammy's exhumation?
I'm not concerned that I wasn't informed. I would like to have known, certainly, but it wasn't a tipping point for me.
You were asking questions about who was present at various law enforcement interviews that you've had.
Yes,
And if I heard you correctly, you don't remember any names. Is that right?
having thrown that question at me in that moment, I don't recall any names. If I search deep enough, I'm sure I could recall some names.
Let me ask this question. Reflecting back, let me withdraw that. To the best of your recollection, how many law enforcement contacts have you had relative to Chad?
I don't want to say the term a surprising number because that's not where I want to go, but I would say probably 20-ish, maybe more. There have been a lot of individuals that we've talked to, that we've expressed challenges that we've had with, and I don't recall a certain number.
I want you to reflect back and think, during those law enforcement contacts, did any of those members of law enforcement in any way try to influence what you would say or do?
No, they did not.
Did you, in working with law enforcement, ever tell them anything that wasn't true, the best that you understood?
I did not.
Did you ever get any feeling that they were trying to influence you?
I have a brother who's a police officer. I've never felt intimidated by a police presence, and I didn't feel that they were doing anything more. The process of dealing with a lot of this until the kids were found was just, can we find some children? That was their primary concern, and that's what I felt they were trying to express and see what they could do.
In any of your interactions with law enforcement, did you ever have any inclination that they weren't sincere about the desire to find these children?
I did not.
Calling your attention to the December 18th law enforcement interaction when you made the phone call, either at any point in the interaction, did the phone number that you used to call Chad, did you make sure that law enforcement had that phone number?
I definitely did.
You were asked a lot of questions about Chad's book publishing.
Correct.
From 2015, 2014 forward, did you have any concerns about his book publishing and how they might be influencing Chad?
On his book publishing or authors he published, or
Any part of his book publishing that may have influenced Chad, or concerns if you had those?
I was concerned with one particular author that he really seemed to push a little more, but that might be it.
You were asked about potential embellishment. I do want to draw your attention back to the La Jolla, California and Flaming Gorge incidents we talked about earlier.
Yes,
I think you explained that originally they were experiences. At some point, Chad explained them to you as a near-death experience.
correct.
Was there some point that Chad began talking about or teaching near-death experiences?
I would say yes.
About when was that?
I would say probably around the time frame that he moved from Utah to Idaho, that became more of a focus in talking about and dealing with near-death experiences, and had a couple of authors that had similar views.
Did that cause you any concern?
Initially, no, because I was fascinated a bit with that. But over time, as I thought and reflected on it, it became a little bit more of a concern because of the consistency and frequency and the number of people within the group that were still having those particular experiences.
Why were you concerned in that regard?
I was concerned because it just seemed like it was almost to an unhealthy level.
What do you mean by unhealthy?
It became a focus of sorts, that, and it did primarily that.
Mr. Pryor had asked you a question in relationship to Chad's statement in the phone call that was recorded about it being a simple situation. Do you remember that question?
I do.
At some point, did you learn that Tylee and JJ were buried in Chad's backyard?
I did.
Do you consider that a simple situation?
I think it's far from a simple situation.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right, Mr. Pryor, any requests for recross?
Yes, Judge.
Yes, I'll allow some limited recross.
On the recording, again, we talked about the simple situation. You're talking about the end result as far as what happened with the two children, correct?
Correct.
But at the time on the tape recording, there was reference at least once or twice to a family law attorney. And isn't it true that Chad, wouldn't that imply that he believed that this was a custody matter?
I don't know what he implied by simple situation. I can't speak for what his intention behind that was. He did give me an attorney's number. And at the time that was going on, I had met with law enforcement. I didn't feel it was a simple situation by that point. I don't know why he would state that.
Okay, but I'm not asking what you thought.
Mhm.
I'm asking you as someone who has known Chad for a significant amount of time,
Mhm.
for him to make a statement that it was a simple situation and then providing you with a family law attorney's information.
Objection, Your Honor. This is calling for speculation.
Sustained.
The prosecutor brought up on the number of people that were at that December 18th meeting. Do you physically recognize the prosecutor at the end of the table closest to me?
Asked and answered. Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That will conclude the testimony then of Mr. Gwilliam. As I mentioned previously, not subject to the exclusionary order, so he can go ahead and step down. That concludes your testimony. I don't know if he'll be recalled or under subpoena. If there's anything anyone wants to tell him regarding a subpoena, you can do that. Otherwise, we'll just move on to the next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the state doesn't have an intention, but he's excluded from the exclusion order, so we don't have any concerns with releasing him from the subpoena today.
All right. Mr. Pryor, is he under subpoena on the defense?
Judge, he's not under subpoena. And Judge, I apologize. I was distracted. Did the state say that they're going to keep him available?
At this point, we'll release him, but I'm
No
not
objection,
waiving
Judge.
the right to perhaps call him later.
Okay, you are released from your subpoena then, based on the statement of the state. So you may go ahead and step down. Thank you for appearing and testifying.